Sleep with the pigs. All you'll get is muddy. That's kind of funny, but not so funny when you think about it. That's the title today of our episode, and it's fitting. We're finishing up The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's a journey through the biggest financial scheme in history. Before I read this book, kind of participated in the scheming. I was in business and I didn't do anything overtly evil, although I realized later on that the system I'd been participating in for a long time could be described as evil. Now, this is a bit of a somber episode, finishing up the truths from The Creature from Jekyll Island, but don't worry, we're going to share some really solid hope for you at the end. So, buckle in. When Griffin wrote this book, the debt was $5.8 trillion. He was shocked. He was amazed at what we had to do. Today it's $39.2 trillion. The system is badly broken, but there's hope, as I mentioned earlier. We'll talk about it. In the final section of the book, it's called Time Travel to the Future. There's 3 sections. 1, Doomsday Mechanisms. 2, Pessimistic Scenario. And 3, a realistic scenario. As we've been walking through Griffin's masterwork chapter by chapter, today we'll finish section 4, Time Travel to the Future. It's been a grind, but you need to know the global scope of this scheme in order to fight it. This isn't just history. It's happening now. It's right in front of us. You can see it happening. And there is a way out. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder. We're sponsored by hodlandtees.org, and you should jump over there, look at some of the merch, and see if you can afford to buy some to honestly just help us support this show. There is a promo code you can enter, WELCOME10. You'll get 10% off of your entire purchase. So, the episode, why it matters to us. Well, the honest truth is the Fed wasn't built to prosper us. It was built to enslave us. Griffin wrote these scenarios back in '94. Many of them have come to pass. The pessimistic scenario remains unchanged. The realistic scenario involves pain and choice. It is interesting to point out that Griffin didn't have Bitcoin. We do. There's also, if you'll allow me, a Christian lens we ought to look at this through. Jesus came to save us all from our sins, not financial sins, just many myriad sins, all the evil there is into the world. That kind of changes how we engage. We're given a choice between freedom and slavery. We're not looking to exclude folks who are not Christians. We love you too, and we would gently invite you into a conversation with us about Christian traditions. But your traditions respect honest weights and measures too. Overall, financially, you look at the world the same way we do. What I want to point out to Christians is our earthly focus is to share the love of Jesus with all and live as he did and does, with respect for everyone and everyone's beliefs. He was just careful to point out exactly what's necessary in order to be in eternity with him. So let me do something quickly. I want to be bold and call out evil. I'll just say it. The Fed is evil, and we need to do away with it peacefully. We should dig into chapter 24 pretty quickly, Doomsday Mechanisms. Let me kind of cover some takeaways that I had when reading this chapter, and then we'll read the summary. I'm going to define a doomsday mechanism as a system designed to self-destruct when under pressure. The biggest one of all is the Federal Reserve System. Griffin recounted the key mechanisms of the Doomsday Mechanism. Debt-based money, creation of the debt-based money, can never be repaid. It's debt-based money. There isn't any real money in it. It's debt. Inflation as a hidden tax is another component. Inflation erodes purchasing power. Is your home really worth what they say it's worth today? Is the utility value of that home what they say it's worth? Have homes gone up in value? The answer to all of that is no. It's not that the home is worth more, it's that the money is worth less. Let me talk about the boom and bust cycles. They're engineered throughout our history. They're not accidental. Bailouts, bank bailouts, they're a moral hazard. They privatize gains and they socialize losses. We can go back and look at this, but we need to realize that the collapse of the Federal Reserve is inevitable. Quoting Griffin from the end of the book, and we'll read this section as well, but I'll predict it and say it here. Quoting, "It now roams across every continent and compels the masses to serve it, feed it, obey it, worship it. If it's not slain, it will become our Lord and Master." So let's dig into the reading, the final few chapters of The Creature from Jekyll Island. The section is called Time Travel into the Future. And in this section, Mr. Griffin tries to warn us, tries to show us what it's going to be like. And honestly, since the time of publishing, a lot of this has come to pass already. But it's important to kind of read the first paragraph leading into the chapter or the section. In the previous sections of this book, we've traveled through time. We began our journey by stepping into the past. As we crisscrossed the centuries, we observed wars, treachery, profiteering, and political deception. That has brought us to the present. Now we're prepared to ride in our time machine into the future. It will be a hair-raising trip, and much of what lies ahead will be unpleasant. But it has not yet come to pass. It is merely the projection of present forces. If we do not like what we see, we still have an opportunity to change those forces. The future will be what we choose to make it. Folks, it's sobering, but I need to point out that a lot of the things he projects have now happened. What he projects as outcomes of following the Fed's manipulation has happened. So let's dig in. Let's talk about Chapter 24 and Doomsday Mechanisms. The summary at the end of the chapter is kind of a long one, but it points out, or I should point out, that $5.8 trillion was the debt when this was written. It's now $39 trillion. Reading, "The United States government is mired in a $5.8 trillion debt. By 2001, interest payments on that debt were running $360 billion per year. That consumes about 19% of all federal revenue and costs the average family over $5,000 each year. Nothing is purchased by it. It merely pays interest. It represents the government's largest single expense. Interest on the national debt is already consuming more than 36% of all the revenue connected from personal income taxes. If the long-term trend continues, there's nothing to prevent it from eventually consuming all of it. By 1992, there were more people working for the government than for manufacturing companies in the private sector. There are more citizens receiving government checks than there are paying income taxes. When it's possible for people to vote on issues involving the transfer of wealth to themselves from the others, the ballot box becomes a weapon whereby the majority plunders the minority. That is the point of no return. It is a doomsday mechanism. By 1992, more than half of all federal outlays went for what are called entitlements. Here's another doomsday mechanism. Entitlements are expenses, such as Social Security and Medicare, which are based on promises of future payments. Entitlements represent 52% of federal outlays. When this is added to the 14% that is now being spent for interest payments on the national debt, we come to the startling conclusion that 2/3 of all federal expenses are now entirely automatic, and that percentage is growing each month. The biggest doomsday mechanism of all is the Federal Reserve System. Every cent of our money supply came into being for the purpose of being loaned to someone else. Those dollars will disappear when the loans are paid back. If we tried to pay off the national debt, our money supply would be undermined. Under the Federal Reserve System, therefore, Congress would be fearful to eliminate the national debt, even if it wanted to. Political environmentalism has caused millions of acres of timber and agricultural land to be taken out of production. Heavy industry has been chased from our shores by our own government. High taxes, rules beyond reason for safety of devices in the workplace, so-called fair employment practices, and mandatory health insurance are rapidly destroying what's left of the private sector. The result is unemployment and dislocation for millions of American workers. Government moves in to fill the void it creates, and bureaucracy grows by the hour. Federal taxes now take more than 40% of our private incomes. State, county, and local taxes are on top of that. Inflation feeds on what's left. We spent half of each year working for the government. Real wages in America have declined. Young couples with a single income have a lower standard of living than their parents did. The net worth of the average household is failing. The amount of leisure time is shrinking. The percentage of Americans who own their homes is dropping. The age at which family acquires a first home is rising. The number of families counted among the middle class is falling. The number of people living below the officially defined poverty level is rising. More and more Americans are broke at the age of 65. None of this is accidental. It's the fulfillment of a plan by members of the CFR who compromised the hidden government of the United States. Their goal is the deliberate weakening of the industrialized nations as a prerequisite to bringing them into a world government built upon the principles of socialism with themselves in control. The origin of many of the stratagems in this plan can be traced to a government-sponsored think tank study released in 1966, called The Report from Iron Mountain. The purpose of the study was to analyze methods by which a government can perpetuate itself in power, always to control its citizens and to prevent them from rebelling. The conclusion of the report was that in the past, war has been the only reliable means to achieve that goal. Under world government, however, war technically would be impossible. So the main purpose of the study was to explore other methods for controlling populations and keeping them loyal to their leaders. It was concluded that a suitable substitute for war would require a new enemy which posed a frightful threat to survival. Neither the threat nor the enemy had to be real. They merely had to be believable. Several surrogates for war were considered, but the only one holding real promise was the environmental pollution model. This was viewed as the most likely to succeed because, one, it could be related to observable conditions such as smog and water pollution. In other words, it would be based partly on fact and therefore believable. And two, predictions could be made showing the end of the Earth scenarios just as horrible as atomic warfare. Accuracy in these predictions would not be important. Their purpose would be to frighten, not to inform. While the followers of the current environmental movement are preoccupied with visions of planetary doom, the leaders have an entirely different agenda. It is world government. Wow. You probably noticed a couple of things in there. You probably noticed references to single-family incomes. How many of you have just one adult working in the household? It's unheard of that both father and mother don't work. That was one reference point. The other reference point was how long it took for families to acquire a home. Today, many families don't even have a shot at a home. They have to rent. That is to say that if they wanted to buy a home, which is questionable now because some think home values are going to decrease when it's realized that the home is really not worth what we pay for it. But nevertheless, that's been the American dream, to own a home. And now it's all but impossible. I say these things just to point out how much time has passed since Griffin wrote this book. The next section we want to move into is called a pessimistic scenario. Griffin kind of lays out the worst case, beginning in 1994 when the $5.8 trillion debt seemed insurmountable. I don't think he could have imagined when he wrote this that $39.2 trillion would be the actual debt. And I'm guessing, but I'm assuming he realizes that repayment of the debt is impossible. It's lost. Nevertheless, we're going to walk through Griffin's pessimistic timeline because it is instructive. It's instructive because some of it's occurring already, and it's instructive because it gives us a glimpse perhaps into the future. Inflation will continue. Currency debasement will continue. Economic collapse is going to trigger bank runs, bond market freezes, hyperinflation. There will be a government response, and we're seeing it now. Central bank digital currencies, precursors, or the same thing by another name, stablecoins. Loss of property rights, wealth confiscation, social unrest, authoritarian measures. How much of this has come true already? Do you feel like you're living in a surveillance state? It's expanding, watching what you do and how you do it? Do we have perpetual quantitative easing and money printing? Have you experienced the erosion of some of your privacy rights, some of your property rights? Yeah, I think so. The pessimistic path that Mr. Griffin points out is totalitarian control via control of the currency. And that's beginning to happen. Now, you can be aware of this, or you can be kind of head in the sand and ignore it because things are going okay for you. I think maybe it's time to wake up. So let's continue reading A Pessimistic Scenario. This chapter is a little bit long and kind of points out some pretty scary things, but I'm going to point out the hope as well. A pessimistic scenario of the future events includes a banking crisis, followed by a governmental bailout of the eventual nationalization of all banks. The final cost is staggering and paid with money created by the Federal Reserve. It is passed on to the public in the form of inflation. Further inflation is caused by the continual expansion of welfare programs, socialized medicine, entitlement programs, and interest on the national debt. The dollar is finally abandoned as the de facto currency of the world. Trillions of dollars are sent back to the United States by foreign investors to be converted as quickly as possible into tangible assets. That causes even greater inflation than before. So massive is the inflationary pressure that the industry and commerce come to a halt. Barter becomes the means of exchange. America takes her place among the depressed nations of South America, Africa, and Asia, mired together in economic equality. Politicians seize upon the opportunity and offer bold reforms. The reforms are more of exactly what created the problem in the first place. Expanded governmental power, new regulatory agencies, and more restrictions on freedom. But this time, the programs begin to take on an international flavor. The American dollar is replaced by a new UN money, and the Federal Reserve System becomes a branch operation of the IMF World Bank. Electronic transfers gradually replace cash and checking accounts. This permits UN agencies to monitor the financial activities of every person. A machine-readable ID card is used for that purpose. If an individual is red flagged by any government agency, the card does not clear, and he is cut off from all economic transactions and travel. It's the ultimate control. I'm going to pause reading for a second. You just lived through COVID. Were you called out because you didn't get the shot? That's an example of the government using external influences to put restrictions on you because they've made you fearful that you're not safe. Folks, this stuff is happening already. We'll continue reading. Increasing violence in the streets from revolutionary movements and ethnic clashes provide an excuse for martial law. The public is happy to see UN soldiers checking ID cards. The police state arrives in the name of public safety. Eventually, all private dwellings are taken over by government as a result of bailing out the home mortgage industry. Rental property is also taken as former landlords are unable to pay property taxes. People are allowed to live in these dwellings at reasonable cost or no cost at all. It gradually becomes clear, however, that the government is now the owner of all homes and apartments. People are living in them only at the pleasure of the government. They can be reassigned at any time. I'm going to pause here again. To some of you who are struggling to find a place to live or to afford a place to live, this might sound good. When you take it, you're trusting that your overlords are always going to be fair to you. When you give someone else the decision over your way of being, you're giving them control over your life. It's got to be a better way. Let's continue reading. Wages and prices are controlled. Dissidents are placed into work armies. There are no more autos except for the ruling elite. Public transportation is provided for the masses, and those with limited skills live in government housing within walking distance of their assigned jobs. Men have been reduced to the level of serfs who are subservient to their masters. Their condition of life can only be described as high-tech feudalism. There is no certainty the future will unfold in exactly that manner because there are too many variables. For example, if we had assumed that there would not be a banking crisis, then our journey would be different. We would not see long lines of depositors or panic buying in the stores or closing of the stock market, but we would still witness the same scenes of despair in the more distant future. We merely would have traveled a different path of events to get there. That is because the forces driving our society into totalitarianism would not have changed one iota. We still would have had the Doomsday Mechanisms at work. We would have the CFR in control of the power centers of the government and of the media. We would have an electorate which is unaware of what's being done to them and therefore unable to resist. Through environmental and economic treaties and through military disarmament, the UN, we would witness the same emergence of a world central bank, a world government, and a world army to enforce its dictates. Inflation and wage price controls would have progressed more or less the same, driving consumer goods out of existence and men into bondage. Instead of moving toward the New World Order in a series of economic spasms, we merely would have traveled a less violent path and arrived at exactly the same destination. Folks, I know this doesn't translate well when I'm just reading it to you. I pray that you'll pick up this book, read it, and understand where we came from, how we got to this place where we're being controlled and manipulated, and evil is abounding to steal your autonomy, to steal your personal authority. This is not just in America, this is globally. The final chapter is called A Realistic Scenario, and I'm going to add to it because this was written at a time when Bitcoin didn't exist, but it's important to understand the role of Bitcoin and why it gives us more hope than Griffin even gives us. A Realistic Scenario. We have finally come to the end of this book. It was not a textbook on banking theory, it was a whodunit, and by now you know the answer. We've covered a vast expanse of history and have wandered far afield from our main topic. It was necessary. Without the larger view, the case against the Federal Reserve System would have been weak. It would have omitted the elements of war, revolution, depression, and fraud. Without that long journey, we would be limited to a sterile discussion of interest rates, discount policy, and reserve ratios. That's not where the body is hidden. In the foreword, it was stated that there were 7 reasons to abolish the Federal Reserve System. It's time to repeat them. 1. It is incapable of accomplishing its stated objectives. 2. It's a cartel operating against the public interest. 3. It's the supreme instrument of usury. 4. It generates our most unfair tax. 5. It encourages war. 6. It destabilizes the economy. And 7. It is an instrument of totalitarianism. The purpose of this book has been to demonstrate the accuracy of those assertions. A plan for recovery was finally presented, which involved 16 steps, each based on lessons which emerged from history. These lessons were mingled with a large amount of theory, which is traceable only to the mind of the author himself, which is to say there's no guarantee the plan will work, but it is a plan. It's better to fail trying than to do nothing. Like men on a sinking ship, we must risk the water. We cannot stay where we are. There's undoubtedly technical flaws in these proposals, for the mechanism is merely a prototype. Someone surely will discover a gear that will not mesh or a lever that's disconnected. It will need the additional work of specialists in many diverse fields. Even then, the job will not be complete, for it must finally be handed over to those who are skilled in drafting legislation. Their task will be twofold. First, they must make it workable in the real world of politics. Secondly, they must prevent loopholes and vagaries which could eventually subvert the plan. But none of these considerations should deter us from beginning the process. We may not have answers to all the technical questions, but we do have an answer to the big question. We do know that the Federal Reserve System must be abolished. Let us, therefore, begin. The creature has grown large and powerful since its conception on Jekyll Island. It now roams across every continent and compels the masses to serve it, feed it, obey it, worship it. If it is not slain, it will become our eternal Lord and Master. Can it be slain? Yes, it can. How will it be slain? By piercing it with 1,000,000 lances of truth. Who will slay it? 1,000,000 crusaders with determination and courage. The crusade has already begun. Folks, this is a really important book. It's really important for you to read it for yourself, not just rely on me and my summaries. It's important for you to read it to understand where we've been, understand that the predictions Mr. Griffin made a long time ago have been proven out in large part. We're on this path. It is going to this place. And he offers a tool for you. It's called freedomforceinternational.org. I would recommend that you go there, take a look at it, see what he has done. And let me finish with just a couple of words on where we are. What Mr. Griffin didn't have was Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes the equation. We have opt-out money. You don't need permission to use it. You don't need any third party telling you what it's worth. It's just code. It's global. It's neutral. It has no religion. It has no government. It has no central authority. It has every property and then some of sound money, like fixed supply, verifiable, divisible. Bitcoin enables a peaceful revolution, one sat at a time. There's a Christian angle that you should consider. It is true stewardship. It's honest weights and measures that are going on forever. It's preparing the world for what's coming. Bitcoin is hope. It's the escape hatch that Mr. Griffin didn't realize when he wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, but I'm sure he sees it now, and I'm sure he's a fan. So what struck me the most in reading through this book and reading it again to read the summaries to you is that Mr. Griffin saw it all coming, and most of it has already happened. The pessimistic scenario that he pointed out in the last section is playing out in slow motion. The realistic scenario, in order to avoid the bad stuff, it requires courage and you making an individual choice. I want to suggest to you that Bitcoin is worthy of your study. It's worthy of you considering whether or not it's a way out of this muck and mire. It's not political reform, it's monetary reform. It puts controls on the politicians. You don't have to wait for them. You don't have to wait for the politicians to wake up and get it. I hope there's some good politicians left out there that are not shackled to the system of the past. I hope they will study this and they will come out into the world with us and change from the Federal Reserve System to the Bitcoin system. I want to emphasize the Christian lens. We know how the story ends. We know who wins. We know we're bound for heaven. That shouldn't be a reason not to act, that should free us to act with courage, to act with the idea that sound money is a biblical standard and a standard of a lot of other world religions. Honest money, fair trade, peace, freedom or slavery. It's your choice. Please choose freedom. We're going to be back to our regularly scheduled program, just discussing things of the world of Bitcoin and giving you just straight up advice on what's happening and what you should be considering. We're not giving you any financial advice. We're not trained in that way. And honestly, the rules of the past don't make any sense for the future. But we would just say that we'll provide you the evidence. You consider it from your own perspective and make a good decision on what to do with your finances, and more importantly, what to do in your participation in the world. This concludes our series on the creature from Jekyll Island. Next episode, we'll be back to normal, not quite so heavy. If you have managed to watch through this entire series, we want to thank you. We mean that. We think maybe you'll tell other people about this, and maybe we can share this truth with them too. We love you. We'd like for you to follow us here at these places, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.